Hello and welcome to By the Book. I'm your host, Joe Hebert. Today we continue our course on truth, justice, and leadership with the discussion of Plutarch's How to Tell a Flatterer from a Friend. As we discussed last time, Plutarch is an author and a public figure from late antiquity. He was Greek in origin, but was writing during the time of the Roman Empire. And he's famous for applying Socratic ideas to politics and public life. And he does this both through the study of famous historical figures and their lives, but also in a series of essays which address practical issues and problems and help to sort of talk through these issues from a Socratic point of view. And the one we're looking at is his essay, How to Tell a Flatterer from a Friend. And last time we saw that the basic distinction between a flatterer and a friend is that, a friend as the greatest external good in life is somebody who helps us to be our best. A flatterer, by contrast, is somebody who's using us for some purpose of their own, and it's not for our good, even though they always want to make us feel like it is. So how do you tell the difference between a friend and a flatterer? Part of the problem, as we saw, is that anybody who's very clever, and think of your Machiavellians and that type of attitude, they're going to be putting all of their wit into ways to make you think that they are your friend. And so really at the beginning of the essay, he says the biggest problem here, the biggest reason that we have trouble with this is because we're not actually a good friend to ourselves. So we have a partiality, a bias towards ourselves. We love ourselves, but we don't love ourselves well. We don't have self-knowledge, and we don't have self-discipline. So what Socrates had talked about, the well-ordered soul, the self-discipline that's needed to live a good life, there's no escaping that. That is the fundamental good in life. And so other goods, including friendship, are not really available to us if we're lacking in this fundamental good of the well-ordered soul. So we'll see how that Socratic concept is really the linchpin in this essay. If we're seeking self-knowledge and we're seeking self-discipline, then we're much better positioned to be able to discern whether somebody is being a friend or is simply pretending to be a friend. And so last time we looked at the setup and we saw that there's two major sections of this essay. And the first one is on more of the defensive side. How do you protect yourself against a flatterer? And we'll look more at that section today. And then finally, in the next episode, we'll look at the other side of it, which is if friendship is such a great thing, then how can we practice being a good friend to others? This is ultimately what it's about. It's not primarily a negative thing, avoiding harm. It's primarily a positive thing about living a good life, which means we want to be a good friend to ourselves and a good friend to others. So this section is going to focus on, again, really practical tips to how to spot a flatterer and also, digging into a why. Why do flatterers operate in a certain way? And also, why is that so harmful to us? Like, why is it such a problem that we should be concerned about? So in this passage, he talks about the cleverest trick of a flatterer. And it has to do with observing an aspect of friendship, one of the great benefits of friendship, and then abusing that. So in this case, we're talking about freedom of speech. By freedom of speech, Plutarch is not talking about, First Amendment, some kind of legal, political thing. He's talking about an element of true friendship. How do you tell somebody is your friend? They're honest with you. They speak their mind. They say what they actually think. So when they're saying something, that's coming from their heart. That's freedom of speech. They're not disguising their thoughts, filtering their thoughts in some way. And the flip side is true. He's saying that a flatterer is going to be characterized as somebody who's not telling you what he really thinks. He's telling you what he thinks is necessary for you to hear to get what he wants out of you. So this is, one of the most crucial things to look for in another person is this person telling me this because this is what he thinks and he just wants to share his thoughts with me? Or is this person making something up to get what he wants from me? And so this is the natural voice of friendship, is freedom of speech. While not speaking freely is considered unfriendly and disingenuous. So the flatterer, the clever flatterer, knowing this, knowing that we're going to be looking for this, is going to have a trick that we have to watch for. The more obvious flatterer is just going to be somebody who is just clearly not sharing from the heart. But if it's too obvious, then we're going to have an icky feeling and we're not going to trust this person. So the more clever person is going to try to throw us off. And here's how he does it. Just as clever cooks infuse bitter sauces and sharp seasoning to prevent sweet things from cloying, so these flatterers do not use a genuine or serviceable freedom of speech, but merely a winking and tickling innuendo. So there's a couple of things he's implying here that are very important as to how he's portraying flattery. First of all, he compares it to sweet things and things that are actually too sweet, where pretty soon it's gonna cloy. We're gonna get sick. It's just so sweet we can't take any more of it. And so there are a couple of things you could do as a cook. On the first hand, you could just avoid making things too sweet in the first place. But of course, if you're trying to get sort of the instant hook and get people on something because it's so sweet and initially they like that, and you're trying to use that sort of hook to get them in, but they're going to get sick of it pretty soon, then rather than just making it right in the first place, making it more moderate to begin with, the more tricky kind of cook is going to make it super, super sweet, but then put some other spices in it to kind of counterbalance a little bit. And that's how he's comparing the difference between a true friend and a flatterer. A true friend is not overly sweet. That is, their goal is not simply to please you as much as possible. Their goal is to tell you the truth, to help you to live a good life, to look at your actual good. So when they use candor or freedom of speech, they're doing that for real, and they're doing it basically as indicated or as necessary. Whereas the flatterer is going to be, as he says repeatedly, is going to be buttering you up as much as possible. He's going to be, like that overly sweet kind of food that's just trying to bombard you with sweetness, but knowing that you could get sick of that, or that it might make you suspicious, is just going to drop in, some little criticisms here and there, or some, little remarks that sound like, just to tell you what I really think, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, it's going to be superficial. Instead of coming from the heart, it's just going to be a strategic thing that's thrown in there. So one of the key takeaways from this, and we'll see going through this essay, is that the real way to tell a flatterer from a friend is not simply any kind of simple formula, but it's really having to look under the hood, under the surface, and to see, are these things genuine? What is actually motivating these things? Are they for real? Because almost anything can be faked, especially if you're not paying that close attention to where it's really coming from. But how do you tell what's real and what's fake? Of course, it takes time to get to know a person. But let's say somebody's really clever and they might be really persuasive. They might make a bunch of superficial junk sound like it's what they really think. Okay, so there's no substitute for just getting to know somebody. But just to show you how important this is to Plutarch, and how hard he's pushing us to be on our guard, he says that since a flatterer is going to be changing what he says in terms of calculations of how getting what he wants out of you, as opposed to a friend who's just going to be himself and be more consistent. He says the flatterer resembles a polypus with all the changes. So we may detect a flatterer by pretending to change about frequently, and by centering the kind of life he used formerly to praise and anon approving of the words, actions, and modes of life that he used to be displeased with. So, in other words, try throwing somebody off by changing your mind. All of a sudden you change your mind and you say the opposite of what you said before, and see how this person responds. He will then see that the flatterer is never consistent or himself, never loving, hating, rejoicing, grieving at his own initiative, but like a mirror, merely reflecting the image of other people's emotions and manners and feelings. So in other words, if you do some bizarre maneuvers and the other person basically just adjusts and adapts to it and just goes with it, said this is a sign of somebody who is not being real with you. Because if the two of you are on the same wavelength and then suddenly you go the opposite direction and that person just adjusts for that, then their earlier position apparently wasn't for real. So this is striking because he is recommending actually, fooling this person, actually saying stuff you don't think, but it's a kind of a defensive maneuver or a way to sort of tease out, the person who is hiding. If you think that somebody is just under deep cover, basically, and just doing a really convincing job of fooling you. So as we saw before in the Gorgias, the things that are the most pleasant are not always the most beneficial. Things that are truly good are the most pleasant in the long run, in the big picture, but sometimes they're not that fun at the moment. And so this is one of the differences between friendship and flattery. A friend is somebody who is willing to give pain to the other person if it benefits him. So we saw before, a friend is somebody who is actually trying to help to make you a better person. And that's not always going to be pleasant. So here we'll see much more detail about this in the second half of the essay, how to actually do this, how to be a good friend. But here we get an important statement about how you don't want to overdo this. You don't want to push your friend past the breaking point, to the point where they just can't stand you anymore because you're so negative or it's so painful. The truth that you're telling is so hard for them to bear. So he compares it to a doctor using medicine and says that you may need this medicine. The doctor is going to try to get you to take it, but the doctor will also moderate it. And so to make it more likely that you can actually take it. Doesn't want to overdo it to the point where you just refuse to take the medicine at all. And so he compares the friend to a musician who, in seeking the good, that is, in this case, music, is using a varieties, tightening or slackening the strings, and is mixing things together in a way that overall produces the best music. And the formula that comes out of this is that a true friend is often pleasant, but always useful. So this is very important. We'll talk more about it in the next episode. But it's, a friend is somebody who's willing to cause pain or is willing to be a little hard on the other person for their own good. But it doesn't mean that friendship is generally characterized by being as hard as possible. That becomes inhuman, for Plutarch. You have to keep it balanced. So overall, you want to be, even a friend wants to be more pleasant than painful, but always useful. That is, the friend is always looking towards the actual good and is willing, if necessary, to have some kind of tension with the other person for the sake of their good. The flatterer, on the other hand, is like somebody who's always harping on one note. So he's like the sweet, the food that is just overly sweet. Or in this case, a musician who's just hitting the same, note. It's nice the first time, but after the 50th time, it kind of gets old. But he doesn't know how to oppose. Why would this be? It's ultimately because this person isn't really thinking about your good. So if you're not thinking about somebody's good, all you're thinking about is that you just want to maintain their their goodwill, but you're not thinking about, the bigger picture of what's good for this person. And so they're going to reveal themselves sooner or later by their inability to adjust to what is needed by the good. But notice how this advice doesn't really help too much unless we have a decent sense of what the good is, unless we are exploring that question ourselves. If we're not, then it's not going to be so clear whether or not the other person is keeping our good in mind. So here Plutarch gets into what is really at stake if we fail to detect the flatterer. He says, some people may praise and applaud some words or action, whether in jest or in earnest, but it's just hit and miss here and there. And it's a temporary harm that might be done if they're praising the wrong thing. But a flatterer is somebody who injures the character by his praise. That is because it's an ongoing process of, as he says here, calling what is really a vice, calling it virtue, calling things that are bad good, and doing this through an extended relationship that we have. And it ends up perverting our disposition, which is the seed of actions, and the character, which is the principle and fountain of life. So it's changing who we are. If we think about character, human character, there's a sense in which our identity, our condition as a human being is something that we make with our choices. The more that we choose good things, the better person we become. The more we choose bad things, the worse person we become. And by calling bad things good, the flatterer is getting us actually over time to become a worse and worse human being. Well, how do we escape this? Again, there's no pain, no gain is one of the underlying formulas that we see here in Plutarch. And so where are we going to get a test to see what's really good for us and how to really build our character? He has an interesting story from Carneades, who says that the sons of rich men and kings learnt nothing really well and properly except how to ride. So he noticed that all these kind of spoiled brat children, they weren't good at anything except riding horses. And he thought, well, why is this? And it's because their master, their teacher, would praise and flatter them in their studies, and therefore they didn't really end up learning anything. Their wrestling coach would let them throw him, and therefore they didn't really learn wrestling very well. But the horse, not knowing or caring whether its rider were a private person or a ruler, rich or poor, soon threw him over his head if he could not ride well. So the horse, being an animal and not being susceptible to caring about somebody's wealth or status or rank, in other words, the horse is not a flatterer. And therefore, the horse is going to teach you how to ride, whether you like it or not. And if you don't know how to ride, you're going to find out soon. So this is going back to the point that we have to be a friend to ourselves. We have to look for those who don't flatter, even if that's animals, right? In this case, we have to look for those tests to see, are we actually objectively improving as a human being, or is this just flattery? If somebody keeps telling me how good I am at X, I have to find a way to test that and see if that actually works, or is that just what this person is telling me for their own purposes. Find somebody who has no interest in flattering you and see if they have the same opinion. This is something we have to be strategic. We have to be proactive at testing people, testing other people, and testing ourselves. And this is an example of how we can do that. So another way that we can tell if something is genuine or fake, again, a good flatterer is going to pretend to criticize, is going to pretend to try to help you become a better person. But he says very characteristic that they're going to seize upon superficial things. So, for example, he says here, If he sees any pot or pipkin out of its place, or anyone badly housed or neglecting his beard or attire, or not adequately attending to a horse or a dog, he will go on about that. So that's going to make him appear like he's honest. He's trying to help you out. He's pointing out, your tie doesn't match this or that. But when it comes to more serious things, contempt of parents, neglect of children, bad treatment of wife, notice how our relationship to other human beings is much more important than our clothing or our material possessions. That's part of what he's saying here. If somebody's always trying to push you to aim higher in terms of material things, this, Plutarch is indicating, this is flattery. It's a form of flattery. Now, in the next segment of the course, we're going to look at, say, modern advertising and think about that in terms of flattery. The whole idea that somebody would always be pushing you to improve in terms of material things, which obviously is a core feature of advertising. And Plutarch is telling us here that is flattery, because that's not where happiness comes from. That's not what it means to be a good human being. And so always pushing somebody to improve in material things is not trying to help them become a better person. Quite the opposite. If it leads to a neglect of other more important things, like our relationships with people, or throwing away money. So again, you could see the connection with advertising. They want you to throw away money. They want you to spend. Whereas a friend is more likely to say, do you really need to spend this money? Or is it really going to be good for you in the long run to spend on these frivolous things? But the flatterer is not calling attention to those more serious things. Again, because the flatterer is not, in fact, trying to help you become better, and so has no motive for getting into those things. Now, in this passage, we come back to how being a friend to yourself is the best way to have true friends and to guard against flattery. And here Plutarch goes to the order of the soul. He says the soul has true and noble reasoning elements in it. It also has these emotions that can pull us off track. And so the friend is a counselor and advisor to the better instincts of the soul. The friend is always trying to bring you back to the better part of yourself and make you remember your higher potential and realize that higher potential. Whereas the flatterer works upon the emotional and unreasoning part of your soul, tickles and titillates them and seduces them from reason, employing sensuality as his bait. So the order within us is really the ultimate guide to our relationships with others. Those who are strengthening the good part of ourselves are true friends. Those who are trying to feed the worst part of us are the flatterers. So one of the points that Plutarch makes is, we saw the superficiality of the good behavior that a flatterer will put on, try to look good. Another thing that he mentions is that the flatterer will put on a show. Every time the flatterer is doing any favor for you, doing anything that appears to be a good deed, he's going to be blowing a trumpet, calling attention to it, really putting much more energy into bragging about what he's doing for you as opposed to doing it. On the other hand, he has a few humorous anecdotes about how friends will just use little tricks to help each other without even calling attention to it, without the other person even knowing, slipping money under their pillow or something, So they know the person needs money, but they don't want to brag or call attention to themselves. They just want to help the person without even trying to get credit for it. So moving on from there, he says, it's not even just the exaggeration of what the person does to benefit you, but even more important than that is the actual substance. Are they doing good things for you? Or on the other hand, are they actually doing favors for you which are not really good? In other words, if you're trying to rob a bank and the person says, hey, sure, I'll help you out with that, that is not a sign that they're a helpful friend. It's a sign that they're a flatterer. So he says, the friend is not as Gorgias defined him. We get his reference back to Gorgias here, one who will ask his friend to help him in what is right, well, he will himself do many services for his friend that are not right. So, in other words, the friend is not somebody who's willing to commit crimes for you, not somebody who's willing to do shameful things for you. For a friend should share in good and not in bad action. He will therefore, the friend will try and turn his friend, away from what is not becoming. A true friend would tell you, wait a minute, I'm not going to do that for you. That's not right. It wouldn't be beneficial for you to help you in something that is criminal or shameful. I'm only going to help you with actual good things that are actually good for you. And he cites this saying, you cannot have me both as a friend and a flatterer. That is, a friend and no friend, because a flatterer, of course, is a fake friend. So obviously, we shouldn't be asking people to do bad things for us. But if we see that somebody is willing to do bad things for us, that is a sign that they are not a true friend, that they're a flatterer, because a true friend would not want us to do anything bad and would not want to do anything bad for us, because that's not compatible with our true good. And last but not least is, how does a friend versus a flatterer relate to other friends? Because if friendship is such a good thing and the friend wants the good of his friend, it means that he should want his friend to have as many friends as possible. And here Plutarch cites this famous saying, the goods of friends are common property. So if I really love somebody, if I really want to see them flourish, then I don't want to selfishly keep this person to myself. I want this person to have the best relationships possible. We saw that in the early example. So if I have to criticize this person, it's more likely going to be, you are ruining your relationship to other people. Here's how you could improve that. The flatterer, on the other hand, he says he generally is an envious kind of person, but he has two misgivings about your other friends. If your other friends are flatterers, then he's going to oppose them, not because he wants to protect you from them, but because they're competitors. He's simply competing with them, and he wants to be the flatterer who's going to get more out of you rather than this other person. On the other hand, if somebody else is a true friend or a potential true friend, then that is a threat, because he knows that what he's offering is fake friendship. Again, he uses the image of the debased, the spurious coin, the counterfeit money. And he said he knows that what he's offering is counterfeit, and this other person would be a true friend, and that's even more of a threat, because it's going to by contrast, expose who he really is. So if somebody is, interfering with your relationships with other people, now a true friend, notice that it would be implied that a true friend would try to protect you from flatterers. So there's always a complicating factor. We always have to be able to discern, is this person objecting to my other friend out of jealousy, out of envy, or out of actual concern for my well-being? In that case, we have to figure out which one of these people is a friend and which one is a flatterer, basically. But on the other hand, a flatterer is going to be opposing both other flatterers and friends. So certainly somebody who is basically against all of your friendships and is really trying to peel you away from all of your other friends, that would be a sure giveaway that this person is a flatterer, because they're not discriminating between the relationships that are good for you and bad for you. And so, again, the overall lesson here is that a friend is somebody who's seeking your good. And so if we are cultivating a well-ordered soul, we're seeking what is objectively good. And if we do what we can to try to test things and see if they're actually good, like with the horsemanship example, the horse is not going to be a flatterer. So that could be an objective test that I can use to see if somebody else is flattering me. We need to be reasoning about the good for ourselves. And this can help us to see, is another person actually trying to help me become a better person, in which case this is a true friend. I should cultivate that relationship. Or is somebody telling me what I want to hear And even when they contradict me, it's just in superficial ways which are designed to make me think that they are, being honest, but is actually just strategically a little bit of spice they're throwing in there. Whereas overall, they are just telling me what I want to hear. That is a sign that somebody is not really willing or able to help us become better, and therefore in the long term can pose a significant threat to our well-being. So next time we will turn to the second half of the essay, in which Plutarch is going to explore if we're cultivating friendship, a true friendship, and we therefore want to be a good friend to another person. How can we go about doing that, given that, as we've seen, there are certain challenges, particularly the fact that telling people the truth when they don't want to hear it can be very difficult, very painful, and that can put the friendship at risk, despite the fact that that's what a true friend has to do. So how he's going to argue we need to be artful about the way we practice friendship, so that even as we are speaking from the heart and trying to help somebody become a better person, we can still be artful and strategic about doing that in a more successful way.